Welcome back to the studio, everybody, and welcome to yet another episode of Project Looking Glass. Today's video is probably going to be a little bit shorter than usual, but it's going to cover a topic that would be key to our dark fantasy adventure game that we've been building thus far. In our previous videos, we've covered everything from player stats and combat systems to an interactable object mechanic where the player walks up to an object, sees a widget pop up on the screen, and then picks up that object based on a key input. In today's video, we're going to be expanding upon that notation by creating a typical treasure chest or loot box system, one that hides an item inside of it until you open the chest. Along with that, we will also be covering how you can use the same mechanic to apply enemy drops. We'll be going over how to do item referencing, collision fields, and actor spawning. This should be a useful one for anyone interested in item drops, so let's get into it. Alright folks, so in order to create this item spawning mechanic, we're going to need something to spawn out of. We're going to be using geometries to create a chest. So I'm going to show you how to do that real quick. So in order to use geometries, the first thing that we need to come up to selection mode over here. We're going to come down to brush editing. It'll be the second from the bottom. Once in this, you'll have a new menu pop up. We're not going to be using this, although you can use this to manipulate geometries. We're going to go over to place actors, and you're going to want to come over to this symbol. It looks like two boxes sitting inside of each other. This is going to be your geometry box. So these are all going to be your geometry shapes. These are basic shapes that you can then modify how you see fit into whatever shape you want. And I'm going to show you how we do that. So we're going to take a shape, drop it into the map. So as you can see, this drops in as a fairly large shape. This is actually done in units down here in brush settings. So a basic shape is going to be done on scale, with 1 unit being the 3 feet by 3 feet size. That's going to take up one of these cubes here. But the geometries are done centimeters, so they're going to be set up for 200 centimeters cubed. Makes them twice as big as a basic shape. You can still change this. You can modify it with the brush settings or with the scale. If you modify it with the brush settings, it will go back to its original shape. So once you get a shape how you want it to be, you only want to use scale. For the purposes of this build, we're just going to make a simple chest. So I'm going to take this. I'm going to cut its Z in half to 100. And we'll right-click this object and go to Snap, Snap to Floor. It'll just place it on the floor real quick. It is a bit cubish still, so we're going to cut the X in half. Let's do 50. That's a little bit much. Let's kick that back up to 75. Yeah. And let's cut Y down to 100 as well. That's a little bit much. Let's cut Y and Z to 50. Or actually, let's cut Z to 75. That looks a little bit better, actually. That actually looks good. Snap to floor. Alright. So here is a nifty tool to use with geometries. Geometries have different properties in a basic shape. So we can duplicate a geometry. And we're going to want to center this again. So the original one was 1000, 1300, 37.56. Don't know why it's that. 1000, 1300, 37.56. That looks okay, I suppose. I don't think it will matter in just a second. Alright, so in order to make this into a chest, what we're going to want to do is take our second geometry and use it to carve out the inside of the first. So we just want it to be slightly smaller, so let's go up to our scale, make sure that it's locked, and put in 0.9, ever so slightly smaller, and we can raise this. We can actually lower that by 5 points, so that's level. There we go. Now, In our brush settings, if we scroll down, we have this brush type. If we select additive and set to subtractive, it will carve out the shape of the second geometry that was placed. Geometries are placed on layers, so the first one is always going to be on the bottom layer, and every geometry above it is going to modify whatever geometry is below it. So since we have two, we have one geometry cutting out a cube from the center of the other geometry. And you can actually select the inside of this to get the second geometry. But what we're going to do is select our first geometry. Yeah, there we go. We're going to duplicate that again. And we're going to want to make sure it's set back to its original space. 1000, 1300. There we go. And we're actually going to make this the lid. So we're going to do 5 as its height. And you can see if I zoom off of this, since I placed this a third geometry, it actually overrides the second one. We're going to raise this, put it right on top of the lid. Actually, I don't think it really matters. So here we have a lid, and we're actually going to make a little latch for it. So duplicate, again, 1000. I don't know why it's doing that. But we're going to make this pretty short, so we'll do 5. And let's do 10 on the size. Bring that to the front. And the idea is we're going to make this into a latch for it. That's a little bit thick. Let's increase the size to 10. And the width. Drop that a little bit. Actually, yeah, that should be good. Okay. So in order to turn these into static mesh, we're going to select the geometries that we want to become a static mesh. First, you're going to want to save. So select the geometries that you want to be a static mesh. Currently, we only have 4. I'm going to choose the first and second one. This is going to be our base form for the chest. On our details panel, come all the way down. Hit Create Static Mesh. It'll bring up a menu. Select where you want the mesh to go. I'm going to select our game menu. And we're going to name this SM for Static Mesh. And we're going to do a chest base. There we go. Create Static Mesh. Now the second one, we're going to need to do something a little bit extra. So we have this cube on the end that's going to be our latch, I suppose. But if we make this a static mesh, we'll only be able to turn it into one color. So we're going to change that. Selecting the static mesh that you want to change the color of, come over to the details panel, select brush component, and here you can set an element. Right now, this will only set the element for one side of the object though. So we'll need to select all the sides of it. Come down to geometry, hit select, all adjacent surfaces. It will select all the faces of the surface, or it will select all the faces of the object that you have selected at that moment. Now when we go to change it, and we're going to change it to just a basic color, it turns the entire object into that color. And now we can select the 2 geometries, create a static mesh, and turn this into SM underscore lid. There we go. And there we are. Now we have 2 static meshes that we can now turn into an object. So I'm going to delete these, and we will go ahead and turn this into an actor. In our game menu, we're going to go to collectibles, and we're going to create a new blueprint. We're going to call this, as an actor, BP underscore spawn chest. There we go. Open it. All right. So we're going to place a spawn chest. We're going to add 2 static meshes. Actually, we're going to add 3 static meshes, and I'll show you why. We're going to drag that out of there. There we go. So the first static mesh is actually going to be our pivot point. Our second static mesh is going to be our lid. Ooh, SM underscore lid. There we go. And our third static mesh is going to be our chest base. There we go. Now we're going to want to organize this so it looks correct. The pivot point is actually going to come to the back of the chest. Oh. There we go. For some reason, I have this set to scale of 1. Let's set that to scale of 5. There we go. Raise that up. Back a little bit more. So it is overlapping a little bit. Let's fix that so there's no artifacting. There we go. And that's good. Now there is one issue. Currently our lid, I don't know why it's set up that way, but we can fix that real quick. If we drag onto the pivot, we can set the pivot at its correct area. We're going to set that at the back. Oh, let me fix that real quick. There we go. And that's not quite enough. Is that too much? That's too much. Zoom it back. Right there. That's about half. And now we can drag the lid onto static. Oh, wait. I should probably rename that. There we go. So the reason we set this up on a pivot is the same reason we did it on the door. Now, when we go to rotate the pivot, it will open and close the lid. That's pretty good. All right. So now I'm actually going to take the code from the door and we will be right back with that. Okay, folks. So we're back and I wound up getting all of that code switched over from the door onto the chest. And now we can go about adding our spawn mechanic. As you can see, we have a now kind of bland chest. We'll go in and change the color scheme of this in just a second. But if you walk up to it, you get the widget from the door. You can see it's the same. And if you press E to interact with it, it now opens the chest. And that mechanic is going to spawn an item inside of it. So I'm going to show you how we go about doing that. So in our spawn chest, we're actually going to do something real quick because the color scheme is kind of bothering me. So we've got this world grid material. We're just going to select that. Select the lid and make that into something else. Let's do a nice walnut. If I can spell, make it a worn walnut. I don't know why it didn't select the other one. There we go. And the blue is kind of throwing me off. Let's make that into a gold. This is the reason why we set up one item being a different color than the others, because now we can set this to whatever color we want. There we go. Compile, save, and now it doesn't look like it's not there. One thing I did notice, and I'm going to show you how to fix this real quick, you can actually walk into this object and walk straight through it. So the way to fix that, if we go, there we go. So if we go to our static meshes, we can actually change the collision on these. So if we go up to lit and select player collision, there's no collision set up on these. In our details panel though, if we go all the way down, we'll find something called collision complexity, project default. We'll select that, come down to complex collision as simple. And it creates a form fit collision field for that object. And we'll just do that for the lid as well, and that fixes that problem right away. And there we go. All right, so in our chest, now that we have this set up, what we're going to do in our event graph, we have player interact set up to play a timeline to open the chest and rotate the pivot. What we're also going to do is create a custom mechanic. So we'll do a custom event. You don't need to do this on custom event, but I find it's useful. Spawn item. Coming off of spawn item, we are going to do a spawn actor from class. And you're going to want to get the spawn transform. Oh, this is something that we need to do. In our viewport, we're going to add another static mesh to the object. We're going to add, I don't know. Oh, I know why I did that. We're going to call this spawn point. And the reason it did that is because I had the object selected in the content browser. That's fine. We don't need a static mesh for this. It just needs to exist. It needs to be at the center of the object. Just like that. I do not know why it did that, but okay. Oh, I see why. That's exactly why we did this. So we're going to need to get a spawn transform. That's why we have the spawn points. We're going to take spawn point, get relative, or get component, world location. There we go. We're going to split the pin structure, and we're going to add our return value from world location onto transform location, and that will fix that. We still need to select a class, so we're actually going to right click on class, promote it to a variable, and we're going to name this variable as item to spawn. And this is how you can create a modular chest system, so you can choose what item goes in what. We're going to make that a public variable by selecting the I. Compile, save. And let's do an item to spawn just as a base. I created a couple of items. Let's do a health orb. If I can spell for once. There we go. So that's going to spawn an item right there. And that should be good for our spawn mechanic. Now we just need to add it on finished. Actually, not on finished. We're going to add it right here. Player interact. The reason we're going to add it here instead of on finished is because this will wait until the chest is completely open to spawn the item. This will spawn the item inside the chest, and then it will open the lid. So since it will happen so fast, this should look good. And now, let's check. We can walk directly into it, and it has collision. If we go to open it, that looks really good. There is one issue, though. There is one issue. Okay. Let's do this. So we only want it to open one time. Best way for us to set this up I got it. Best way to set this up, we're going to disable the collision on the box collision. set collision enabled, and we will set that to no collision. And we will set that at the beginning here, right when you interact with the object. That way you can't spawn the item more than once. There we go. Now when we go to open it, you cannot spawn it more than once, but you can collect the item. That's how you create a chest with customizable objects inside of it using geometries and static meshes. Alright, and there we have it, folks. That concludes our new video on item spawning and treasure chests. So in this video we covered how to use and disable collision fields for dynamic item spawns, and the spawn actor mechanic where we summoned items inside the chest once it was open. And we also covered how to use public variables to set specific drops inside the objects for it to spawn. We also touched on the geometry tool, which I showed how to use to create the chest itself using static meshes. And I think this is a good mechanic to cover overall, because you can't really throw a stone in the RPG games industry without hitting a game that uses a system like this. So with this tool, we have taken the first step to creating an inventory and equipment system, and we will be creating those systems in the future. If you enjoyed this video, or you found it useful, hit the like button and subscribe to stay up to date on our upcoming videos. Stay tuned for our next video, where we will be starting our damage system and adding damage to the player's attacks. It's going to be fundamental to our combat system, so I hope to see you there. Until next time, go out, make an impact.